Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with the dissolution of Legislative Assembly in Jammu and Kashmir. Now let me give you a brief background of what this issue is all about. In 2015, there were elections to the Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly and no political party was in a position to form a majority in the 87-member Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly House. Now then what happened? PDP and the BJP, they came together and formed the government. So it was a coalition government. In June this year, the BJP withdrew support to the government, and from then onwards, there was a governor's rule in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now from the polity point of view, what you need to understand is that Jammu and Kashmir enjoys a distinct constitutional status in the scheme of things in India. So unlike other states where there is president's rule, in Jammu and Kashmir there is a governor's rule initially for a period of 6 months. And this governor's rule is imposed on the grounds of breakdown of constitutional machinery according to the constitution of Jammu and Kashmir. So there is a period of governor's rule for a period of 6 months, and after the completion of this 6-month period, if the situation is still such that there is no political party in a position to form the government, then what governor can do? Governor can recommend to the president for the imposition of president's rule under Article 356 of Indian Constitution. So there is a difference between Jammu and Kashmir and the other states in India. In other states, there is president's rule straight away. And the maximum validity of a president's rule, as we have discussed in our previous lecture, is 3 years. But so far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, there will be a governor's rule initially for a period of 6 months. After the expiry of the 6-month period, then there will be a president's rule, and there is no upper limit for the president's rule when it comes to the Jammu and Kashmir state. Because unlike other states where 3 years is the maximum limit for a president's rule, so far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, there will be governor's rule for 6 months, and then there is no upper limit for the president's rule under Article 356 of Indian Constitution. Now what happened yesterday in a dramatic turn of events, 3 political parties, Congress, PDP and the Jammu and Kashmir National Conference, they decided to come together and stake claim to form the government. And on the other hand, a 2-member party, a political party which has 2 members in Legislative Assembly called People's Conference headed by Sajad Lone, they also staked claim to form the government along with the support from the BJP and many smaller parties. And what governor did? Governor called for the dissolution of Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. Now once the Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly is dissolved, it paves way for the conduct of Legislative Assembly elections in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Because as per the existing structure, Election Commission shall have to conduct elections, shall have to hold elections in the state of Jammu and Kashmir within a period of 6 months. That is what this issue is all about. Now let's look at another issue on page number 1. US citizen killed by Underman tribals, and this can be relevant for your GS paper 1 where Society of India is one of the subjects in your GS paper 1. Now for this we need to understand who are these tribals. Then you will be in a position to better understand this newspaper article. Tribals are basically aboriginals, or we call them the original inhabitants of this land. There is a general consensus amongst the sociologists and anthropologists that Aryans came from outside. Although some dispute this fact that Aryans came from outside, but nevertheless many people believe that Aryans came from outside. And when Aryans came from outside, they pushed these tribals, the original inhabitants of this country, to the forests. And there they maintained their identity, they maintained their distinctiveness. They did not merge with the people of the mainland India. Now the question was, during the British time also, these tribals were left alone initially. But slowly and steadily, tribals were infiltrated, their areas were infiltrated, their lands were captured, and that led to the tribal unrest during the majority period of the British rule. Then once India became independent, Pandit Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, he brought in Verrier Elvin. And through Verrier Elvin, he decided to frame a policy regarding to tribals. And that came to be known as the Tribal Panchsheel, the 5 beautiful principles that will guide our relations with the tribal people. So Pandit Nehru made a beautiful statement. He said, we should not make these tribals second-rate copy of ourselves. They should be allowed to develop on the lines of their own genius. How they want to develop, when they want to get aligned or assimilated with the mainstream India or mainland India, that is for the tribals to decide. So more and more there was a policy that tribals should not be infiltrated with, their land should not be confiscated, they should be allowed to maintain their distinctiveness, to maintain their individual identity. And that is why there are some tribal areas where even today there are restrictions, where you cannot venture into without the permission of the government. One such area is the Jarawas of Underman, where outsiders are not allowed to visit. The other area is the area where this US citizen was killed by the Andaman tribals, and that area is the North Sentinel Island. So that is what this issue is all about. An American citizen entered this protected area, the tribal area dominated by North Sentinel, and ultimately he was killed by the RAU'S. And those who facilitated this US citizen's travel to this protected area, they have been booked under law and the case has been registered. But so far as tribals are concerned, there are some sociologists, for example, G.S. Gure, who says that these tribals are backward Hindus. There are others who say that these tribals are uncivilized people, but we should look at them with empathy. They are neither backward Hindus nor are they uncivilized people. They may be more civilized than the people in the mainstream India. And in a federal polity, in a distinct polity, and in a concept where we value unity and diversity, we have to respect the sentiments of the tribal people and ensure that their rights are not violated and ensure that they are able to maintain their distinctive identity. And that is their fundamental right under Article 29 of Indian Constitution. Every section of the citizen in India who have a distinct language, script or culture of its own, they have the fundamental right to preserve their culture, and that fundamental right is available to these tribal people as well. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. Now let's look at another issue. Birds flee devastated Point Calumet. And what is this Point Calumet? It's a wildlife sanctuary. And where is this wildlife sanctuary? It is in Tamil Nadu. And it has been devastated by the recent cyclone Gaja that struck this area. So in match the following types of questions that are asked in the UPSC prelims, this can be a potential statement for your examination. Match the following wildlife sanctuary, and for that you need to understand this Point Calumet is in Tamil Nadu. Now let's look at another issue on page number 5, relevant for your prelims only. A bird has been photographed, and this bird is a migratory bird, Ortolan Bunting. Now there is not much that you need to understand from this newspaper article except one thing, that the IUCN status of Ortolan Bunting is least concern. So for example, in UPSC prelims, the questions are sometimes asked, which of the following species have been declared as endangered or critically endangered or least concern? So you have to understand, since Ortolan Bunting is in the news, its IUCN status is least concern. Now let's look at another issue on page number 7 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. It deals with your GS paper 2 polity. Now let me give you a brief background of what this issue is all about. There was an individual, Maninder Singh. Maninder Singh raped his own daughter. When he raped his own daughter, he was booked under the law and he was sentenced to death penalty by the High Court of Madhya Pradesh. But then he challenged this verdict in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said, no, this is not the rarest of the rare case. So what we will give you life imprisonment. and Maninder Singh was serving his time in the jail, serving his life sentence. Suddenly what happened? Maninder Singh was released on parole, where for few days or few weeks you can be released on the basis of the directions issued by the prison authorities. So while Maninder Singh was on parole, he killed the same daughter he had raped as well as his wife. When the matter went to Madhya Pradesh High Court said this is clearly the rarest of the rare case and death sentence should be awarded to the offender, to Maninder Singh. Again, he appealed before the Supreme Court. Year was 2013, January, to be precise. A two-judge bench of the Supreme Court said, this is not the rarest of the rare case, so what we will award Maninder Singh, not the death sentence, but life imprisonment. Because Maninder Singh may be a threat to his family, but he is not a threat to the society. A week later, January 2013, the same judge of the Supreme Court was hearing another case. What was that case all about? A 7-year-old boy was kidnapped and then he was murdered as well. When the 7-year-old boy was kidnapped and then murdered, Supreme Court said this is a rarest of the rare case and death penalty should be awarded to the offender. Supreme Court, among other things, said that this boy was the only brother to 3 sisters and this death has caused unfathomable grief to the parents. The boy would have carried forward the family lineage and seen his parents through the old age. This is what the court observed when it justified the death penalty. This verdict of the Supreme Court was heavily criticized at that point in time. Because if you notice, there is a patriarchal bias in this judgment. What does this statement mean? This boy would have carried forward the family lineage and would have seen through the parents in their old age. So it was heavily criticized in the media that there is a patriarchal bias in the judgment issued by the Honorable Supreme Court. And many people compared this capital punishment award to the same judges who awarded life imprisonment to Maninder Singh instead of a death sentence. So many people compared and said, what is the rarest of the rare case? Is it the kidnap and killing of a 7-year-old boy, or is it the murder, rape of a woman and a helpless daughter by Maninder Singh? And then what Supreme Court has said? Supreme Court has said that we are going to review this death penalty in this 2009 case where many people argued that Supreme Court has betrayed patriarchal bias while awarding this judgment. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article, and it again places the focus on death penalty. So sometimes a question can be asked whether you are in favor of capital punishment or not. In your interview or in your mains-based questions, the questions can be framed in such a manner that sometimes you'll have to defend capital punishment. At other times, you will have to oppose capital punishment because there are more than 130 countries in the world that have abolished death penalty. What is your stand on this matter? Should there be death sentence? Should there be capital punishment or not? Please focus on that and build up your own thoughts and ideas. Now let us look at some of the editorials and columns from today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with Retweeting Brahminical Patriarchy, written by G. Sampath. Let me give you the context. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey was on a visit to India wherein he met the Prime Minister Modi, he met Rahul Gandhi, he also met a group of young Indian women journalists. And while posing for a group photograph, one of the participants provided Jack Dorsey with a poster which read, "Smash Brahminical Patriarchy." This poster went viral on the social media, particularly Twitter, and both the Twitter as well as the CEO were heavily criticized for being anti-Brahmins, for being against a community which constitute less than 5% of India's population. Then what happened? Twitter issued an apology. Twitter CEO also issued an apology. What this column focuses upon, it says that there are two wrongs here. Number one, you should not have attacked Twitter CEO for displaying this postcard because there was nothing wrong in that. And this postcard has been equated to a hypothetical situation where G. Sampath says, imagine that there is an Indian CEO who visits United States, thereby poses with a group of women who are colored, basically blacks, and then the poster reads, "Smash racist patriarchy." And if the white Americans would have protested against this, you could have called these white Americans as fascist or supremacists, because violation of the rights of the black people is a reality in United States. Similarly, Brahmanical ideology is a reality in India according to G. Sampath. Similarly, it is no secret that this Brahmanical ideology has treated lower caste people with contempt, women with contempt throughout history and throughout centuries. For this, we need to understand that it is mischievous to claim that Brahmanical refers to only Brahmins. When we talk about Brahmanical ideology, we are not referring to Brahmins as a community. We are referring to that social order which excludes others. What is that social order? According to Chaturvarna system, we have Brahmins at the top, followed by Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. Outside this Varna system, we have untouchables, and some sociologists say women as well. And this entire system is hierarchical. What is a hierarchical system? In hierarchical system, the status is fixed, and this status cannot change. That means if Brahmins are there to teach, if Kshatriyas are there to fight wars or they are warriors, if Vaishyas are the mercantilist class, business class people, if Shudras are there to serve the upper caste, there is no way that this caste hierarchy can change, because it is fixed forever and it is fixed at the time of your birth. If we compare this hierarchical system with a stratificational system, there is upward mobility, there is downward mobility. How? Let's say, for example, my father was a peon. I became an engineer. My daughter became an IAS officer and entered into the top class people of this country. So that means my family's condition has changed over a period of time. From lower class to middle class, now to upper class, my family's status, my family's position is changing. And it can also result that my daughter, who was an IAS officer, her daughter turns out to be a clerk. Her son turns out to be an agriculturist. That means there can be a downward movement as well. There can be downward social mobility as well. This is something which is not possible in a caste system, in a hierarchical caste system. That means this is hierarchy, this is a stratificational system. And when we talk about Brahmanical ideology, we are not referring to Brahmins. We are referring to this social order which places certain level of people at the top and treats others with contempt. There was a time when Brahmins could not get in touch with the Shudras or with the untouchables. There was a time if I was an untouchable, I was moving on a road and then I saw a Brahmin on the other side, I would jump in the mud because my stench is causing pollution to the Brahmin. If I was moving on the road, I would carry a broom with me and I will sweep the floor because even my shadow is causing pollution to an upper caste. It is this hierarchical system that is what we call Brahmanical ideology. And it is this Brahmanical ideology that should be eliminated from the society. Then we can talk about an egalitarian system, a system which is based on liberty, equality and fraternity. That is what B.R. Ambedkar talked about. B.R. Ambedkar said, by Brahmanism, I do not mean the power, privileges of Brahmins as a community. By Brahmanism, I mean the negation of the spirit of liberty, equality and fraternity. In that sense, it is rampant in all classes and is not confined to the Brahmins alone. Although Brahmins are the originators of this. That is what G. Sampath says, that when Twitter CEO posed with a poster, "Smash Brahmanical Patriarchy," it was not against Brahmins, it was against the ideology. It was against that ideology which treats others with contempt. That is what this issue is all about. Second, the post and the person on page number 9, it talks about the appointment to election commission, appointment of chief election commissioners and election commissioners. There is a public interest litigation pending in the Supreme Court. and this public interest litigation talks about that there should be some mechanism where we should strengthen the appointment to election commission, because as of now all these individuals are appointed by president, obviously on the basis of the recommendations of the cabinet, on the basis of the recommendations of the prime minister. Because in India, president is a rubber stamp. He does not have any powers of his own. All his powers are to be exercised on the basis of the aid and advice provided by the prime minister and his council of ministers. So what this PIL talked about, that there should be some mechanism in which we can make election commission impartial, non-partial, and work in a non-partisan manner. Because if the government appoints chief election commissioners and election commissioners, we may see that these individuals may be biased in favor of the ruling party at the center. But we need to understand that there are very few institutions in this country which are regarded in high esteem and which have maintained their independence despite the fact that appointment process may be slightly flawed. One such organization is Election Commission of India. In fact, the credibility of this institution is such that if there are elections in Myanmar, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, the Election Commission of India acts as the observer for these elections. Such is the status of Election Commission throughout the world. In fact, Election Commission is the sole vanguard of providing free and fair elections in this country. Because without free and fair elections, there can be no democracy. And free and fair election is part of the basic structure of Indian Constitution. Election Commission over a period of time had recommended some of the reforms to the government, but the government is silent on the implementation of these reforms. For example, Election Commission said that right now, since the president appoints chief election commissioner and election commissioners, why can't we ensure that these appointments are done by a panel? By a panel consisting of Prime Minister of India, Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha, Leader of Opposition in Rajya Sabha, Speaker of Lok Sabha. We can also involve Chief Justice of India. So it is through this panel or through this committee that names should be recommended to the president for appointment. So if this committee or this collegium recommends name to the president, then we can see that these individuals who are appointed to Election Commission of India, they have wide support. They are treated with regard, respect by all the political parties, and no one will accuse government of being biased against the Election Commission. And Election Commission will then faithfully discharge its duties without any bias, favor or fear. Second recommendation, they mentioned that today Chief Election Commissioner can be removed just like the judge of a Supreme Court can be removed. That means based on the removal process passed by both houses of the parliament, that too by special majority. But if election commissioners are to be removed, elections commissioners can be removed by the president only on the recommendation of the CEC. That means the process of removal is different. CEC can be removed based on the parliamentary resolution passed by special majority. Election commissioners can be removed by the president only on the recommendation of CEC. So why can't we ensure that election commissioners are also removed just like the judge of a Supreme Court are removed? That's another recommendation. Third recommendation, that there should be a cooling off period. Let's say, for example, I am chief election commissioner or an election commissioner. My term expires tomorrow. Tomorrow I cannot join any political party. That means there should be a mandatory cooling off period of 10 years. And for 10 years, election commissioners or chief election commissioner should not be allowed to join any political party. Why? Because it is to prevent conflict of interest. What if today, if I'm in talks with a party A, I am the chief election commissioner and party A is offering me a ticket to Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha after my tenure is over, then I will be biased in favor of this political party A. In order to remove this conflict of interest, Election Commission itself recommended that there should be a mandatory cooling off period, that for 10 years you should not be in a position to join any political party. On the other hand, Election Commission also recommended that there should be no office of profit provided to the chief election commissioner and election commissioners after their term is over. So after my term as election commission or chief election commissioner is over, then I should not be holding any office of profit till my entire life. These recommendations, if accepted by the government, it will go a long way in strengthening the position, the status, the autonomy of Election Commission of India, because after all, it is our asset. It was the Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. T.N. Seshan, who rigorously implemented rules, who rigorously implemented the model code of conduct. And through this model code of conduct, India became one of those democracies where, despite the fact that election commissioners are appointed by the government, nevertheless they work in an impartial manner. But of late, we have seen accusations against Election Commission of India, against EVMs, against the VVPAT, but all these are mere political gimmickry, because all the political parties, one time or the other, they have accused Election Commission. Why? Because instead of self-introspection, instead of going back to the people, what these political parties need, they need a scapegoat. They need a scapegoat so that they do not accept their failure. They do not accept that they have been disconnected from the larger populace, larger social base of its political party. And that is why they need a scapegoat in the form of Election Commission of India, and they attack Election Commission of India instead of self-introspecting about their policies, their leadership. That is what this issue is all about. Now let us look at prelims based questions. Number one, which of the following statements regarding Agent Orange is or are correct? Agent Orange is mentioned on your page number 1 when we talked about a wildlife sanctuary in Tamil Nadu. Agent Orange is a herbicide, yes. It was employed by US in Vietnam War as a war tactic. Correct. Both these statements are correct. Which of the following tiger reserves is or are part of Eastern Ghats? Satkosya, Simlipal, Sunabeda, Nagarjuna Sagar. All these are correct. They are part of Eastern Ghats. Previous year's prelims based question. The chairman and deputy chairman of Rajya Sabha are not the members of the House. Chairman is not the member of the Rajya Sabha, but deputy chairman is. While the nominated members of two houses of the parliament have no voting right in the presidential election, they have the right to vote in the election of the vice president. This statement is correct. So only B is correct, because statement number 1, first is correct, second is incorrect. So this renders the entire statement incorrect. So only 2 is the correct answer. Main special answer should be in 250 words or less. The idea of simultaneous elections will curb and flatten democracy in a diverse and federal polity. It must be resisted. Justify. The idea of simultaneous elections, this is how the intro should look like, to parliament and state assemblies has been around for some time now. The Election Commission has said it would be possible logistically to hold simultaneous polls to the central and state legislatures. But the idea is worth debating. It is not worth implementing. Why? Because you have to justify against the holding of simultaneous polls in India. If simultaneous elections are to be held in 2018-19, what happens to assemblies in states that went to polls last year or this year? What will happen to the assemblies of Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Telangana, Rajasthan, where elections will take place? And after simultaneous polls are held, what if a full 5-year term is interrupted by political realignments in an assembly? That's what we have seen in Jammu and Kashmir. In a vigorous and diverse democracy, there is no guarantee either that the Lok Sabha will run its full term or the assemblies will run their full term. So the point is this: democratic politics cannot and it must not be circumscribed by an artificial fixity of tenure of the legislature. Why should we fix a tenure to a legislature? 5 years, 4 years, 10 years. Such an insistence on uniformity and tidiness would only undermine the people's will by making politics more unresponsive and unrepresentative. Because if fixed term is given to a legislative assembly. I am a member of the legislative assembly. I will take it for granted that for 5 years nothing can happen to me because my term is fixed. And that will make me unresponsive to the needs of the people, unresponsive to the needs of my constituency voters. The first election in independent India, because you have to understand that simultaneous election as an idea is not something new. We started with simultaneous elections until 1970s. There used to be simultaneous elections to both parliament as well as the state legislative assemblies. But then with the declining significance of the Congress party at the center, when we saw the emergence of regional political parties in southern states, democracy got strengthened because of these regional political parties. And since democracy got strengthened because of these regional political parties decided to demand more from the center for their own states. And when they demand more for their states, it is ultimately beneficial for our federal scheme of things, for our federal constitution. So the first election in independent India was held simultaneously at the center and in the states. But election cycles soon diverged once the realities of midterm polls, a multi-party system, coalition politics and federalizing polity kicked in. The federalization of the polity in particular has deepened democracy in India, and with every state involving its own specific format, timetable of political competition, and is throwing up its own set of priorities and issues. The parliamentary federal system has worked well for a country of diverse voices and many minorities. Because today, if there are simultaneous elections, let's say to Maharashtra Assembly as well as Lok Sabha, don't you think that people will be confused when they go out to vote? Because if there is simultaneous elections, it is the national issues which will dominate rather than local issues, rather than state issues. For example, in Maharashtra, farmer distress is a problem. In Maharashtra, Maratha uprising is an issue. Maratha reservation is an issue. But if Lok Sabha election and Maharashtra Assembly election is held at the same time, what will dominate? Demonetization, a national issue. Pakistan, Jammu and Kashmir will dominate. And ultimately, it is going to be a loss for that particular state when national issues dominate over state issues. Conclusion, the idea of simultaneous polls, one nation, one polls. Because when GST was implemented, we said one nation, one tax. Similarly, now there are demands for one nation, one poll. The idea of simultaneous polls threatens to rearrange, curb and flatten out this plural and layered federal system by giving it a more presidential and unitary character. It must be resisted. That is it from now from our newspaper analysis edition. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.